Hi, my name is Matthew Holman, founder of Commerce Catalyst, and I am joined by Daniel Tejada, one of the founders at Straight Up Growth, an Amazon agency that is absolutely crushing it for brands out there. Daniel, thanks for joining. I'm really excited to kind of see what you have for us today.
Yeah, super excited to be on today. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So one of your approaches is doing audits, account audits. And so what we're really happy for is an opportunity to take one of Commerce Catalyst's members, Odyssey Snacks. You've connected with their Amazon account so that you can start pulling an audit and looking for some insights. So I'd love for you to kind of share your screen and show us some of the things that you found out.
Yeah, super excited to get on there. I'll say the cool thing, for us it's automated. All of the things that we're going to show you today are things that you can find within your own account manually. There, it just takes a little bit longer, but definitely some insights that we're going to share, and excited that Odyssey was willing to let us share this live today.
Fantastic.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and just start sharing my screen here.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. So I'd like to start off just talking about Amazon as a search engine. I think this is a really important distinction, between Amazon simply being a retailer, because it is a lot more than that. Last year, 65% of all product searches started on Amazon. You look at something like Google, they're down to like 20% when it comes to product market share. You have platforms that are growing, like TikTok takes 11% of all product searches, for example, there. But Amazon by far and large, the number one product search engine. Right. And so as Amazon is a search engine, we really want to think of it not just from, existing customers, but also for that new to brand, right? 69% of customer searches don't include a brand name, which is great, right? That's why we love it from a new customer acquisition perspective. Typically, we're spending 90% of our dollars, in this bucket here, from an ads perspective. But the downside and also upside of Amazon is that 70% of sales happen on page one of any search term, right? And so if you're not on page one, it becomes very difficult to actually, take advantage of the massive, non-branded search that does exist, for the platform there. Just to further that out a little further here, really getting the top of search on Amazon is so key. 35% of clicks typically go to the first ranking product in search, and then typically the first three results typically do 60% of the click share for most keywords on Amazon. So when we're thinking about Amazon, we really want to consider visibility. Ultimately, it doesn't matter how good your product is. If people can't find you, right, they're not going to be able to buy from you. And so it's going to be a very common theme for this audit here. We'll talk about traffic, particularly sessions, and how we can work towards improving that. But that's probably one of the biggest things that I can see from this brand is how do we improve, the overall visibility for the brand there. So let me jump into just some key findings. So we were able to do an audit essentially in the last 60 days of the both advertising and overall sales data. So there's a couple high-level findings that we're going to break down and work on some ways that you can actually work towards improving some of these issues here or opportunities here. So starting with advertising efficiency. Currently, we can see 46% of ad spend, or $12,000, led to search terms with clicks but no sales, right? So this is definitely on the high. It's not uncommon to see this, percentage. Typically, we like to shoot for a sub 10%. So like I know our company spent $50 million last year on ads. We converted on 93% of those targets, right? So we had about 7% wasted. Most brands, especially the more non-branded converting search terms you get, the lower we expect your wasted ad spend to become, right? So a brand like this, we'd love to see 15% of spend being wasted here. 46% is definitely a little bit on the higher end. Now, the reason this wasted ad spend is so high is almost always driven by research spend, right? So what we define research spend as, it's going to be things like your auto campaigns, your broad match, your phrase match, really anything but exact match and ASIN targeting. We're going to consider research match types. The reason they have more wasted ad spend, you're not as granular with your optimizations, right? So if I say, I have a $1 bid in a broad match for protein bar, that's going to be considered a research match type. That $1 bid is not just a $1 bid for protein bar in that broad match type, but it's a $1 bid for all potential search terms that include protein bar, right? It could be vegan protein bar, it could be cheap protein bar, it could be bulk protein bar, right? Some of those terms are going to be winners and some are going to be losers. And so the idea when we're optimizing or working towards optimizing an account on the ads front. Ideally, as we get winners, right, we're migrating them out of research, we're moving them into exact match race and targeting, and that enables us to have a lot more control, spend a lot less on terms that may or may not convert, and focus more of our dollars on what will convert. And I'm going to show you guys.
So start, Daniel, just to kind of unpack that a little bit. So you're saying like the idea is as you run these broad match campaigns and you start to see certain terms that are converting better than others, then those need to be taken out of the broad match and put into exact match search results. Is that right? Okay.
100%. And I'm actually going to break down like some examples for you guys just to get a good sense of like what we would be doing, when we're looking at those research match types. But that's the easiest way to increase that ad efficiency. If this research spend kind of switches, right, and you have 25% of your spend towards research, 75% towards exact match, you will naturally see this wasted ad spend drop down significantly, just because you're now concentrating more spend on what works, right, versus trying to see what could work, essentially, at the end of the day.
That makes sense.
Awesome. Then a couple other things to look at. We want to see ads-driven sales. Typically for us, that's a good way to indicate the potential of organic ranking campaigns there, and ultimately those are going to be strategies to try to improve organic visibility. So from a profitability standpoint, it's actually not too bad. Only 34% of sales are ads driven. I'll say typically when I'm auditing an account, we're probably looking at like probably about 50% of sales being ads driven there. Ideally, we want to continue to see this drive down as we get better and better organic rankings, especially because this is a replenishable item. Typically that organic revenue with those repeat purchases is going to grow over time. There are some session issues we'll talk about here. So sometimes it does make sense to have this ad-driven sales shift during certain strategy that you might implement. I'll kind of walk through that a little bit more details here in just a bit. And then one other thing we like to look at is your branded versus non-branded spend. In this case, basically all of the ad spend is going towards new to brand search terms. So we love to see that. It is helpful just as a general pro tip. If you have a brand that has decent branded volume on Amazon and you do get conquested, one of the things we recommend within your ad campaigns is to segment branded versus non-branded. What this is going to enable you to do is, let's say you do see spikes in competitors conquesting you or things like that. You have the ability to increase your branded spend very quickly, for brand protection type of things. Let's say you guys are doing big media buys, you've got a big influencer or some sort of spike in branded traffic you expect. You can also kind of coordinate your ad spend there as well. So while we definitely advocate towards new to brand, there are definitely instances where it makes sense to run some branded traffic. And so just general pro tip, keep those branded versus non-branded segmented so that you have the ability to adjust that lever very quickly.
That makes sense.
Here. But yeah, so we're going to break down some of these details and some of these findings in more detail here. But any other questions so far, Matthew?
No, this all makes sense. That's good.
Awesome. Cool. So when we talk about that kind of keyword harvesting here, this is a great visual for it on some of those research campaigns and like really what you should be doing as terms convert. So typically things like auto or research, what we're doing is as soon as we see a conversion come in, let's say in our auto campaign, we get a term comes in there. We don't have to have a lot of clicks. We're looking really for orders when it comes down to keyword migration there. So as soon as we see a migration or let's say conversion in our auto campaign, what we want to do is automatically migrate that term as quickly as we can into what we call performance or exact match so that we have the ability to directly control our optimizations on that keyword. Now the key when you do move a term into exact match, you also want to negate that search query within the auto and within the research campaigns. The reason for that is the auto and research are now going to widen their reach, right? They're going to look for new search terms, new ASINs for us to target, but we allow that exact match to really control our optimizations on most of our spend over time. The negation piece is really important because that's going to do two things, right? One, it's going to allow your exact match to be the only thing that's controlling your bid for that keyword. So it's going to allow you to be more granular, have more control. But it also allows the research campaigns to widen their reach, right? Look for new search terms, new ASINs. And over time, you'll spend less and less on auto and research, more and more on exact match. That's going to help you reduce that wasted ad spend very quickly and really allow you to get your ad conversion rates up as well, because now you have more control over where you drive those dollars. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in some of the actual data here in just a couple slides, which will be fun.
Cool.
And then really quick, just for a visual of like how they break down the spend, I think it's important for brands to take a look from time to time and just get a sense of like, what are we spending in broad, exact auto phrase, even ASIN targeting and category, right? Our two main target match types over time are going to be exact match and ASIN targeting, just because this is where we're going to have the most control, essentially, and we're only targeting an individual ASIN or an individual search query here. You can see even in the exact match type spend, right? ACoS drops down significantly. Conversion rate is almost double what we see on the average performance on some of the other match types. And so that's why it's so important to try to get more and more spend into exact match, less and less out of the kind of research campaigns. It's not that research campaigns are inherently bad. They're definitely great for identifying new potential search terms, but it's really the exact match and ASIN targeting that's going to drive great performance over time there. It's also fun just to take a look at like how you're spending on not just sponsored products, but also other ad types as well. So we can see something like sponsored brands, sponsor brand video. We're not spending very much money over the last 60 days. We spent like $700 as opposed to almost $26,000 towards sponsored products. So they are definitely heavily concentrated on sponsored products. Not uncommon, right? Sponsored products tends to have more it does have the most ad placements, and so usually you'll see cheaper CPCs, right? Which in this case it's $220 on average for sponsored product, $253 right for their sponsor brand. It's $375 for sponsor brand video, and they do have different keywords that they're going after. But there are instances like if I'm looking at sponsor brands right here, right, it's actually performing better just because the conversion rate's like double what we're seeing on sponsored products. So even though it's more expensive to run, it can still be more cost effective to implement a little bit more sponsored brands. So if I was this brand, I might, as a pro tip, I might consider testing out sponsor brand and sponsor brand video a little bit deeper, just to see what we could get, given the fact that we have pretty low spend over a 60-day period there.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense too.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're gonna start getting into the fun stuff here. One, we're looking at the overall account picture. So 26K spend, we see about 69K in total revenue returned over that same time period there. So we've got about 113% ACoS, and then from a tacos perspective, we definitely have some room to grow, especially on the organic revenue side, just to make Amazon a more cost-effective channel for us here, because this obviously doesn't include any of our costs, any of our selling on Amazon fees or things like that when we're looking at that 70K in total rev. So definitely working on growing organic revenue is a big potential goal here to try to make this account a little bit more profitable as well. So we'll talk about how. But first, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper just on the advertising efficiency side of things. So just a couple key highlights we went through before. But one, 75% of that spend being spent on research, right? That's almost $20,000 of the total ad spend. Ideally, we want to see this at like sub 15%, right, as a target for us. The reason why, our wasted spend is $12,000, right, of the 25K that we spent, or 26K that we spent. It's almost 46% of total ad spend. And so we want to see this coming down as well, right? On that wasted ad spend side of things, as we drive a lot more spend away from research into exact match, we will naturally see this wasted ad spend drop down pretty significantly. And we know that there's like one of the indicators for us is if we can start to bring down the research spend is how many conversions do we actually have, right? So when we're launching a new item, if we're launching a new brand on Amazon, we do expect wasted ad spend to start off on the higher end, right? Because we don't know what search terms are going to work, which aren't. But in this case, there's 430 total conversions, but only 42 of those conversions have been moved over to exact match or ASIN targeting. So we know that there's a lot of potential keywords to even start with already in the research. It's just a matter of taking that next step, moving the terms from research into exact match so we can start to really be more efficient with the ad campaigns themselves. Any questions there?
Do you see, like, is it generally like a new brand or something? Is it like 10 terms or 20 terms that like make sense, or is it just usually just a handful of really clear winners? Like, what do you normally see?
It's a great question. So I'd say like when you're first When you're first starting off, you don't need to have 100 winners, right? We could have 10 winning search terms or even 5 winning search terms when you're first launching an item that can help support starting to like concentrate some of that spend.
Okay.
Over time, as the brand gets more and more mature, like I have a brand in the keto space that we sell 2 items only, right? But we've been working with them for 2.5 years. At this point, we've got over 1,000 converting search terms that are non-branded within the account. But I'll say, probably 50 search terms get, I don't know, 80, maybe 75% of the ad spend, right? Okay. Gets allocated just towards those 50 search terms. And that's enough for us to do, we do over $1 million a month with that brand there. So it doesn't have to be huge amounts, right? You also have to consider, like, what are your goals as a business? So if I have bigger budgets, right, or I'm willing to maybe be a little bit more aggressive from an ad spend perspective, I can try and rank on some more aggressive search terms, right? I probably don't need as many winners. If I'm in a competitive category, like this brand here, for example, they're in a competitive category of protein bars here, and they may not have the same budgets that some of the bigger CPG brands in their space might have, right? And so in this case, having more search terms could be helpful because you're probably going to want to go a little bit long tail here. You want to go after, I call it the scraps, but just like lower volume search terms, which you can still definitely get full off of. So you may want to have a little bit more in an instance where you're going competitive. If you're going, like I said, and you have a little bit more of a budget, you can concentrate your spend on some more aggressive search terms or high volume search terms. You might not need as many conversions to like see success.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. Cool. So let's jump into our first dive of a match type, right? So I'm going to start with auto. We're not spending a ton here, but one of the things that stands out, 82% of the ad spend within the auto match type did not convert, right? Here. This is not uncommon. Auto is notoriously inefficient. And unless you're actually doing the work of going through your search term report to look at your auto match types, a lot of brands kind of miss the fact that these are so inefficient. But we can see 82% of spend doesn't convert. So let's talk about like how we kind of optimize against something like this. So a few things, right? One, we want to make sure we're migrating as quickly as we can. Search queries over, just so we can really start to spend on potential winners faster, right? So if I look at a term like healthy snacks, here we spent $21, we returned $83 back, right? It's 25% ACoS, which is well below our 110% here. My conversion rate is an 18%, right? The overall conversion rate on the ad account is 8%. So at 18, we are pumped, right? That's really, really high converting. Also, like typically for us to move a term over on, here at Straight Up Growth, we set a 1 order threshold. There's some brands that want to be a little bit more aggressive, but in this case, we've already gotten 3 orders. We have 16 clicks here. And so I want to spend more against this search term, right? But in an auto campaign alone, I can't tell Amazon to spend more money on this term. And so the only way I can do that is by migrating this search query over into an exact match type. Now I have the ability to increase my bid. Here, that's going to allow me to see more clicks. If the term continues to perform as well, we're going to drive more orders as a result, right?
And it's interesting with the color coding you've got here. So like that yellow is clicks, no sales, but the orange and gray is interesting. So I'm just looking at that, like the protein snacks.
Yep.
You're saying should be moved to exact but bid down because you performed really poorly there. But protein bars, they actually are performing at least better than the average. That should be moved to exact and bid that up.
Exactly. Yep. And every single one of these times, like even the terms that aren't performing as well. So we'll take like protein snacks. One of the things that's key is the number of clicks you get against that search term. So lower price point items like we have here, 30 to 50 clicks starts to give you statistical significance on how that term's going to perform. So I know with 70 clicks, I have a really good idea that this term is just not performing super well against this. And so by moving it over to the exact match, I can bid it down. That's going to mean we'll get less ad impressions on this search term, but that's okay because I want more spend flowing towards the higher performing terms, right? Like the healthy snacks, like vegan protein bars, right? Things like that are going to be...
And it's dominating the spend, right? Because Amazon's optimizing for that click event for
exactly.
you. I mean,
Exactly.
Okay. Right.
Yep. So that's why we don't want to be dependent on something like auto, right? The idea is that we pull out the winners, we pull out the losers too, but that gives us more control over how we do spend, the dollars. Even product targeting as well. Like if we look at this ASIN here, no customer on Amazon searches for an ASIN. It just means that you show up directly on a product detail page there. And so we treat these just like search terms, but just to show everyone if they're not familiar. Like in this case, this is a branded one, right? So that ASIN means that they were targeting, kind of their own listing here. That's okay, right? We segment ASINs into branded versus non-branded as well, and we're going to bid them up and down just like we are, the rest of these search terms for auto. Now you will see some search terms, like one of the things auto does is it casts a super wide net, but it's very light in the click density. So if we're looking at 60 days, right, low calorie snacks, for example, 6 clicks over the last 60 days. It's going to take me at that pace, right, to hit statistical significance. I need to hit 50 clicks. It's going to take me a long time to get there. Just going off of auto, right? So that's why we don't want to fully depend on auto campaigns, because it's going to test, like if you see this, there's 1,000 search terms that they spent $2,200 on that did not convert, right? Not all of those 1,000 terms are bad terms. A lot of them just don't have enough clicks. But when you cast this really, really wide net with really, really low clicks, right, it can take you a while to find the winners. And so that's why this keyword harvesting process that we're talking through is so helpful in being able to get through the losers and get to the winners faster, right? Because as soon as we start seeing terms that make sense, we want to start testing them out further, right? So like healthy snacks, boom, it's a great search term for us to test on. Only 16 clicks over the last 60 days. The reason for that bid's too low, right? At $1.34 CPC, Amazon doesn't really want to show this advertisement. But if we move it to the exact match, now we can start increasing that bid until we find that sweet spot where Amazon does really give us a lot of impressions on a winning term like this.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. And then one of the other things we'll do is we'll start preemptively negating search terms. There's no great examples on this one, but if we start seeing terms where we're hitting 35 clicks, 40 clicks, 0 sales, definitely makes sense to just start negating those terms as well within those research match types.
Okay.
Cool. So let's do the same thing. Now we're going to look at broad match, right? There's a lot more spend in the broad match type. You'll see we get more efficient. So wasted spend does drop from, the 80s to 64%, but we're still pretty high, right? Still almost $4,000 spent on, almost 650 terms here that led to clicks, but no sales. And so we want to operate under a similar methodology, right? Here as well. So in this case, and I'm just using 113% as a target because that's the overall ACoS target right now here. We want to do the same thing, right? Terms that are converting, they're converting with, let's say, a lower ACoS. So we can take like whey protein bars, right? Here, we know the conversion rates are really high, are much higher than our average. And so we can migrate those terms over to the exact match type to give ourselves more control, over some of those optimizations. Again, we're going to do the same thing even for terms that don't perform as well. Like we've got like protein bars, low sugar, low carb, for example. This search query, we're spending a lot on, right? And we're not necessarily getting the exact results we want, right? Part of it is the CPC is so high, which we'll talk about how this changes over time, the more relevant you become. So we'll definitely talk about CPCs. But we know from a conversion rate perspective, even though you're spending a lot, you're not converting at that high of a rate, right? You're converting slightly below your average here. And so we don't necessarily if we're being aggressive on a spend perspective, especially for ranking purposes, conversion rate's really important there. And so for this term, we want to move that over to an exact match type, but we probably want to bid this down, right? We have statistical significance. At this point, we've got 109 clicks, right? We're only looking for 50. And so we know this term converts, but it doesn't convert great, right? If I'm going to spend aggressively on a search term or an expensive term, I would much rather spend on whey protein bars here because even though the CPC is high, right, conversion rate is double, right, in this case, what we're seeing against protein bars, low sugar.
And this is so fascinating to me because knowing the product and I'm a fan of the product, I would think that the low sugar, low carb, that's part of their mission and like how they made it. So that makes sense why they want to bid on it. But it's so interesting to find that term is actually like not that efficient for them as opposed to broader terms like protein bar organic or whey protein bars, which you would think just puts them into this sea of every protein bar out there, but it does look like they're converting better.
Yep.
And you can't prioritize spend to prove that, right? Because like if you made these exact, I could put more spend behind those to actually prove out whether they can be more effective over time than say something like the low sugar, low carb.
Exactly. That just gives you a lot more control. And then one other pro tip, I'm glad that you brought that up on like, if the brand is really focused on the low sugar, low carb, and if what you're selling is not converting that well on certain search terms, that's where you kind of want to take a look at the listing and see like, am I missing the mark, or is there something that I'm not saying within the content?
Right.
So let's actually do that really quick. Let's just do a quick pivot, look at the listing, look at a couple options where we could see that, right? So first is title. Here, this is going to be really important on mobile. 81% of clicks happen on mobile there, right? And so really key value search terms, like putting something in like low sugar, which I do see that in here. They've got organic low sugar. They've got carb in here. One of the gaps in this title, it is like I like that they did an SEO rich title, but they're using commas. Ideally, you want to use line breaks in the list in a title like this, because it's going to allow you to read it a lot better. In this case, it's like keyword stuffed, but it's hard to see like where things are broken up, right? So an ideal scenario, let's just see if there's another brand here. None of them are killing it, honestly. Surprising. Yeah, I don't see like an SEO rich title here. Let's take a look at so I've got an example of some other ones here. We actually work with a different Odyssey that I believe has. Well, let me look at Serenity Kids. Yeah, so like seeing this title, how we're actually like we'll put these line breaks in here, right? It just gives you a chance to make things a little bit easier to see. So that's like one of the little pro tips you can try to do on like trying to get like low sugar, low carb to stand out a little bit more. Next area would be like in your imagery. So see how they've got all these great USPs, right, that they put directly on the images. We love that they're doing that here. This is huge, especially for the mobile shopper. But this is like a easy one that they could add that to, right? So if I'm not converting, right, I've hit my click thresholds here, right? So in this case, I have 100 clicks. I'm not converting against this. I know that my protein bar was built around low sugar, low carb. So that means that I need to create an image that's just focused on that part, right? So I could add it to this. I could redo an image and just focus on like, why is it low sugar, low carb? How did that happen there? So there's definitely some things you can do to optimize against keywords by looking at the listings themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, and then since we're on the listing optimization front here, we also don't see any bullet points, right? They could definitely put it in the bullet points themselves if they wanted. It's missing on that ASIN. There might be, some of the other ones where it's on there or not. I'm just looking to see really quick if I see it in here. Right, so we also don't see it in the bullet points. So that's another kind of opportunity where they could put that low carb. We've got a brand store, which is great. We've got from the brand. Awesome. They could seed a question in here if they wanted. And then they are using A+ Premium, which is great. Notice it takes up like 80% of the white space, so we love to see that. Here, does look like they're using this kind of fun slideshow to kind of hit those USPs. This is great. Again, though, don't see anything about low carb, low sugar on there. As we're looking through this, they do hit a couple of the kind of flavor distinctions, but nothing about low sugar or low carb, right? When it comes to the mobile shopper, which is 81% of searches, A+ content is the second most important thing for purchase, right? They're going to look at your title, they're going to look at reviews, they're going to look at your product images, and then A+ is the next thing they see as they scroll down. So definitely like just because they like if I'm looking at this listing, I literally only saw low sugar, low carb once, right? Within the whole thing so far. So versus trying to reinforce it. So that's probably a reason it's not resonating as well. And it's resonating better actually with the general protein bar segment is because it's really more optimized towards general right now.
Makes sense.
Awesome. All right. So phrase match, we're going to go pretty quick here, but again, we're going to see the same thing. This is the match type we are spending, some of the most amount of ad spend through, actually the number one spender. But it also still has a significant amount of wasted spend, right? 57%, almost $6,000 was spent on 2,200 terms that didn't convert. And so again, we want to make sure that we are grabbing search terms out of phrase match, moving them into exact match there. It's not going to be really too much different than what we saw on the other two on there. But this is really the magic slide, right? The reason we want to get to exact match spend, look at how much that wasted spend drops down, right? We're at 8% in this match type. Exact match here only has like 40 of the total search terms, right? So some of it's branded, which is going to skew this data a little bit. But the reason we want our spend in exact match, like I'll do 200 audits this year, the wasted spend in exact is going to be at least 50% less than what we see in the other match types, like without a doubt there. And that's why that keyword harvesting is so important, because eventually you're going to be a lot more efficient with your ad spend the more spend you put in this exact match type here. And at this point, right now, you really just get to bid optimize towards one of two goals, right? We're either going to optimize towards profitability or ACoS there per search term, or we might be trying to drive towards ranking, which we'll talk about here. Organic visibility, really the number of orders you drive, depending on the competitiveness of the search term, is going to be what gets you to rank or not, right? But it's only going to happen if people are actually buying it, right? So if I look at something like low sugar protein bar, for example, here, we're at a 3% conversion rate, right? 3.5 off of 55 clicks. So we know if I want to spend there, I need to optimize the listing, right, to really work on improving that conversion rate so that I can actually convert on a very expensive search term, right, if I'm trying to make that happen. Versus, something like organic protein bar, it's almost a 20% ad conversion rate, right? This is extremely high converting. Here, I would much rather us spending, the same amount of dollars towards this search query compared to some of these terms that are just not performing at the same level, right? They're both expensive. This is still a really expensive category. It's a very sticky category, so there's a very high repeat purchase rate, which is good. So you will make money on the future purchases, but having higher conversion rates is really like key, right, for making sure that we're driving that spend. And so making sure we get all of the winning terms into the exact match is definitely going to allow this brand to be a lot more efficient with their dollars over time. Any questions so far?
No, I just see some terms that are in both this and that were in the others that probably need to get negated if they're going to be in the exact.
Right, because then you also, that's a great call out as well, right? That's the deduplication piece is really key, because it's like if I moved a term over to the exact match, and the protein bars, low sugar, low carb is a great one, right? We see this in every single match type. That means you have 4 different CPCs, you got 4 different conversion rates, right? Versus just getting it all into exact match, where now you're going to have a very clean data set, right? And now it's really just bid optimizing based on the results. One of the myths that I'll call out that I hear from time to time is like, oh, it doesn't perform as well in exact match. It's never actually the case, right? Amazon doesn't make a term perform better or worse in a broad burst phrase for exact. The only reason you might have differences in performance is because your click thresholds will be different and your CPCs are different, right? Because you have different bids for each. But the overall performance is going to be the same, whether it's an exact match, broad, phrase, auto, right? It's just a matter of getting the exact match to line up data-wise on like the KPIs that you're trying to hit,
Okay.
Cool. So I want to get to the overall picture here. I think this is going to be a fun one for us. So as we look through the overall account, here are a couple things that stand out, right? So conversion rates aren't bad. We're at about a 9% on the overall, about 8% on the ads driven, about 38% ads driven orders, 43% ads driven sessions. The big gap for us though is sessions, right? There's only 28,000 visitors over the last 60 days. Sessions ultimately is going to be the number of unique eyeballs you get to your listings, right? So one of the things I like to say, doesn't matter how good your product is, if people can't find you, right, they won't buy from you. And so I also like to pull the business report. This is like a really easy way to visualize it here. But if I'm taking a look, just get rid of the stuff we don't really need. Buy box is good just to see if there's any issues for why something might not be performing well. And then we'll just get our favorite things. So we've got traffic, we've got our overall conversion rates, and then we've got overall sales right here. One of the things we're going to see, let me just get rid of this part really quick. Zoom in here. Right. If we look at our number one top selling item here, it's not a surprise that it's our top seller, but it's actually our lowest converting item, right? There, like this particular 6-pack listing, right? It has all of the traffic, so almost 14,000 visitors go just to that child ASIN, but it's actually converting at like a 5.5% rate, right? If I look at the other ones, we're converting them in the 20% there, and so typically it tells us a couple things, right? One, we might consider trying to push a different flavor versus this particular listing, simply because the conversion rate is so much higher there. So let's see which one we've got. What is the variety pack? Yeah, so like it's like the combo variety pack, right? Like technically has the lowest conversion rate. Now part of it is this is where most of the ad traffic is going, and so as a result, because we've got some inefficiencies in the ads, it does bring the overall conversion rates down for this. But this is a great way to see, like, are there other potential listings that if I I know the mint chocolate chip or chocolate brownie, for example, seems to have the highest conversion rate so far, 22%. It just only has 1,000 visitors over a 60-day period, right? So in this case, you're only getting 600 visitors a month. It's a little bit harder to see sales, even though it converts well, just because there's not very much traffic to that listing. And so this for us is a good indicator that we have potentially some organic visibility gaps. One other trick I like to do is actually use like brain analytics, specifically their search term report here, where we're going to be able to track our market share. Just give me 1 sec and I will get that set up for us. Need my authenticator code. Okay. Okay, so if you go to Brain Analytics, top search terms, set up the monthly view, look at last month, and I'm just going to enter my ASINs here to get a sense of like, were they a market leader on any search terms, right? So for the month of June now, if we look at May, we see one search term, right? Organic protein bar, 914,000th most search term on Amazon, so it's going to be super low volume. If I go to April, again, super low volume. So what I'm finding is they're not a market leader on any search terms, right? Which isn't surprising given the fact that they don't have a lot of traffic to the listings. In our SUG tool, we have the ability to like look back at any search term you've ever ranked on a weekly basis for the last 2 years. So I'm just going to take a quick look to see. So like there are times where they have ranked, like even on protein bars, low sugar, low carb, they have ranked there at some point in time. But it's not consistent, right? Like I see this, the week of the 7th to the 13th, they capture like 5% of the sales that week. As we kind of scroll through here, I'm just trying to get this where I can kind of look, right? But for the most part, not a ton of times where they do. There are like a couple week stretches where they've ranked well against those search terms. So this is it. Like I know they spend a lot here. Not bad if we can optimize our listings a little bit more towards the search term. Definitely seems like something that's got potential. We also see things like whey protein bar, which they're ranking on right now, or excuse me, they have ranked on in the past. And so it's just a good kind of visual to try to figure out what types of search terms we should concentrate on.
Is this like because these are ones that have been close or they've shown up before? So
these are ones that they've shown up in the top 3 on a weekly basis, right? So it's every search term there. But what we'll find is like when I go into the regular kind of term, like on a monthly basis, very rare. If I go to like weeklies, we'll see certain weeks where they rank well. So like, what's the week here? So this is like 14th to the 20th. So pull the 14th to the 20th. So like if we look at this week, right, like organic protein bar, they ranked on that week. For example, they took 11.7% of all the sales, right, available for that search term for that week. Now, what this is, when we're using this as a diagnostic tool like we are now, it's really an indicator to see, like, do they have any rankings? Do they have terms that they are winning on right now? And the answer is no, right? Like, there's no terms where they are a market leader currently. And so for us, it's an indicator that we want to start implementing something we call a ranking strategy to start to become a market leader on more search terms, right? That's really our goal at the end of the day.
So
here.
the idea would be starting to pick some of these terms and actually optimizing the entire listing for that term, right? And
Exactly. Nailing it. And so this next part here is going to be really key. So when it comes to where you rank against a search term, and also when we talk about CPCs, this also becomes important because the more relevant you are to a search term, the less you'll pay from a cost per click basis over time. And one of the things you'll notice, right, like during the audit, a lot of those protein bar related search terms, really, really expensive. The reason they're expensive is because they don't rank very well against those terms. And so Amazon makes you pay more than the person that's ranking, first organic, right? Because Amazon knows those products have a high likelihood of conversion. They've got a lot of data to support that on the search term level. And so they try to force those products to show their ads over yours because at the end of the day, they ultimately want the overall sale more than they want the ad sale.
okay.
And so we're going to play up those KPIs in order to rank ourselves, right? When Amazon determines where a product ranks organically, they're looking at 3 factors. How many clicks does a product have against a search term? How many sales or orders does a product have against a search term? And then ultimately, what's your product's conversion rate against that search term itself? What's cool about Amazon is that they don't care if a product gets purchased or clicked on organically or through the ad. If your ad is driving sales, you're doing enough clicks, you do it at a high enough ad conversion rate, you have the ability to essentially directly impact your own SEO. And so this is like really a huge piece for like a ranking perspective. So if I'm looking at where we're spending right currently, so let's say I wanted to try to rank on like even organic snacks for kids. This is a pretty good one here, actually. Almost 18% conversion rate here. A term that we probably don't rank on right now, but because the orders are too low, but we could get there, right? Because of the fact that we have a high enough conversion rate. And so one of the things we'll do, if we do a search here, currently, right as we scroll down, we are showing up.
There it is right there.
Yep, but that's a paid placement, right? But it's great to see that we're there. Organically, though, as we scroll down, let's see if we're on page 1. All right, so like organically, we're as the further and further down we go, right, the less likely it is we're actually going to get a click or even an ad impression organically on this. So like organically, we don't rank on page 1, right? We do have that ad placement there, part of that widget. We missed it in that second result. But ideally, we'd like to see us sitting on page 1, right? And so that's a good example of one that, okay, if I wanted to do a ranking strategy, what I need to figure out is how many orders do I need a month to actually make that happen, right? In this case, they only spent $48 over the last 60 days against this search term. You can use Helium 10 has a tool that'll give you like a rough estimate. We've got like some of our own math that we run here internally, but one of the things I like to look at is the more competitive the search term, the more the more orders you have to actually concentrate to get that ranking, right? Itself. At least the ads-driven ones. Eventually, the better and better you rank, right, the more organic sales you'll have against that search term, and so you need less ads-driven sales to actually make it happen. But in this case, right, on an 8-day period, it's saying you need to hit 26 orders to get to top half of page 1 here. In this case, this brand is running, they're doing 5 orders over a 60-day period, right? So they'll never rank organically with that low of a number of orders a month being driven, right? They need to be driving closer to 75 orders a month in order to actually get to page 1 there. And so in this case, this is also where the power of exact match comes in. Is if this is one that I'm trying to rank on, I can start to spend more there in order to actually improve my visibility. This is something we do across the board, right? I'll show you what it looks like when you execute it properly. So our brand here. So ketone test strips, see this advertisement above the fold, advertisement there. Then we're the first organic listing, right? I'm even more expensive than everybody else on here, right? Perfect Keto, much better, well-known brand. They've got an $8.69 and an extra 15% off coupon, right? But we're still winning here. If I look at my market share, for example, against this client here, you'll see we are a market leader on 50 different search terms, right? And you start looking at some of the volumes, like ketone test strip was the 15,000th most searched term on Amazon. Our brand took 37% of all sales, right? The number one market share. Keto strips, 39% of all sales, right? Keto test strips, 41% of all sales. Even though we're more expensive, in this case, we literally don't even have any distinguishing features. We're selling all of us are basically selling the same thing in a different label here. But because we've been able to establish such good organic rankings from this ad strategy that we're talking about now, I'm able to do significantly more revenue. I have significantly more market share, and I'm very, very profitable because we've been able to get those organic rankings up. Now that, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we could do this as a recap at the end. You can finish up kind of what you're sharing.
Yeah, so what I was going to say in the last part, right? Like what this brand needs is to play offense, right? Here, especially in the ranking pieces. So when we're talking about ranking, like playing offense could be a little bit more expensive. Some of these search terms are going to get pricey as you start to rank against them. But the goal is the more relevant you become, right? The cheaper the CPCs can become over time there as well, because Amazon wants to start showing your advertisement. So that's going to be a really great advantage of this in the long run. But in the short term, there is a little bit of pain shifting some of the spend towards those winning search terms, but it could definitely help us in the long run, right? Like organic protein bar, we've got a really, really high conversion rate here. It is expensive at $3.16 a click, but it's something that we've got 84 clicks, so we know we're statistically significant there. What is it going to take me to actually rank, on a search term like that? Okay. And I'll say that's most of what I wanted to cover today, honestly, for it. So we'll finish off with any last questions. Then I'll kind of recap us here at the end on some.
Oh, no, I certainly wanted to hear the recap of kind of this whole process of how, the idea of harvesting keywords, finding the opportunity, optimizing the listing so that you can do well on the organic side as well. And apparently it's if Amazon starts to see you doing well on the ad side, it's going to start ranking you on the organic side better for that as well, because it's seeing conversions.
Yep, 100%. So if I'm this brand, right, I think ranking strategy is going to be key, right? So that's what we've talked through here. I would start working towards identifying which terms we want to start testing. We don't have to settle on one, right? We can test several. There's enough budget here. But driving a lot more spend towards exact is going to be huge. The ad efficiency, like we talked about, is going to be key, right? So we have this really high-wasted ad spend right now, but it's driven by this really heavy research spend. So I'd like to see you kind of invert this. I'd like to see 25% of spend or less being driven towards research. That's naturally going to drop this wasted ad spend down significantly. You'll harvest these converting terms, move them into exact match. It'll make it where you don't only have 42 terms moved in exact match in ASIN targeting. So that I'll get ad efficiency up. I want to see us ranking, right, like we mentioned, and start implementing some of these ranking strategies there so we can start to get sessions up. And then I would probably go through a conversion optimization exercise within the listings like we spoke through earlier. I do have some kind of other options here on some of the content. I actually have a couple different specific findings. Some of the stuff we already talked about, but if you guys want to share this audit kind of like in your Slack channel there, so people can review that. That'll still just be some specific points on the listings that we'd like to see them kind of optimize a little bit better in the future as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be great to share. I think that'd go really well. Cool.
Awesome. But yeah, that's what we got here for Odyssey. So good account, lots of potential. But yeah, we definitely talked through a lot. I know some of these strategies are more advanced than others. But at the end of the day, it's like, Amazon gets more and more expensive every year from a advertising perspective. And so being able to be as efficient as you can is really key. Like even if you're not in a competitive category now, it could get more competitive later, right? And so just getting that wasted spend is huge. Being able to improve organic visibility is huge for profitability in the long run, especially like competitive categories like this. You've seen some of the CPCs. I used to work with Quest Nutrition at my first agency before they sold for $1.5 billion, right? It was aggressive then, but my CPCs were $3 a click for the term protein bar, right? Now, if you saw some of those clicks were $6 a click, right? This is 3 years later. And so it's just a natural, it's a great example of what happens with Amazon in any category over time. And so these organic ranking strategies, the efficiency things, they're going to allow you to future-proof your business, right, and set yourself in a better position.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Absolutely.